Thank you so much to Dawn for leading that session, and thank you to Mary and Jessica for all of your insights. Excited to welcome you to the next session. What do B2B buyers want? The software buying experience of the future. And Misty, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session. As Rebecca said, we are going to be talking about what do B2B buyers want, the software buying experience of the future. I am Misty Chandler, the Director of Renewals and Expansion at Tackle. So thank you for joining us today. And with me today, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Anna Baird, the CRO at Outreach, Dai Vu, the Managing Director of Cloud Marketplaces and Business Initiatives at Google, also our silver sponsor for the event, and Godard Abel, the CEO at G2. So welcome to our panelists and welcome everyone. Excited to get this conversation started. The first thing we're going to talk about today is really kind of just diving in a little bit into the software buying process. So this is just an open-ended question, so anyone feel free to kind of comment and join in. What are some of the processes in the software buying cycle today that are causing significant friction for buyers?
Do you want to kick off? I know you had a great talk track as we were talking about this the other day.
Yeah, no, thanks, Misty and Anna. And I think one thing we're seeing at G2, and G2, we are now the biggest software marketplace. We have 7 million software buyers looking for enterprise solutions coming to G2 every month. And I think one of the big challenges we're seeing with software buyers is we're talking about a crisis of trust. And last year at G2, we did a survey, well over 1,000 enterprise SaaS and cloud buyers. And I think sadly for those of us that are software vendors, it turns out that 94% of those buyers don't trust vendors. They don't trust salespeople. They don't trust marketing people. And I think it's a result of our industry. We are great at selling and marketing, but sometimes we'll overhype features, maybe overpromise, before we can actually deliver. And so I think that's one big challenge. B2B tech buyers, they really don't know who to trust.
Yeah, I think as you look at what technology is doing today, I think you also look at who those buyers are. And obviously the millennials are turning into a big buying group that's out there today. And they buy differently, more collaborative, multiple stakeholders. So we've also seen buying groups go from, numbers of like 15 in 2019 to 20 something. So you have to understand also how to engage all of those multiple stakeholders that are in the buying process and how are you collaborative with them. But I think they're digital natives as well, right? We talk about the consumerization of B2B, and on the selling and buying experience, they want to buy the way digitally. They want to be able to get context and go self-educate and understand without necessarily having you involved. So how, as a salesperson, and so how do we give them, but as a go-to-market sales team, how do we give them those paths to be able to self-educate before you engage directly and give them some of that trust on, let me just show you some of the things that might help educate you through the process before we actually have a discussion. And I think that has been such a huge trend that we're seeing. And obviously the pandemic, influenced that even more so, but giving them that opportunity to educate through the process.
Yeah, no, I think, Anna, that's a great point. I think enterprise software buying has really changed. And we also like to talk about the consumerization. And I think that means there's many more people at your customer involved. And I remember when I started out in enterprise software, I think in 1998, and back then it was still the CIO was buying most big applications. And it was really much more about in-person relationship building with the CIO and, his or her team. Whereas today, and frankly, back then you could also control information. I think that's what we're all trained to do in solution selling. Like, hey, only give them information if you get something in return. But I think you're right now, Anna, we're expecting it to be more like consumer experience, more like shopping on Amazon. And we want to do our own research. We want to shop online. And the other thing we're obviously seeing at G2, we want advice from peers. And just like on consumer sites like Amazon, we all shop based on reviews. And obviously that's a trend, we're very much supporting at G2. But I think they want their own information. They want it when they want it. And I think if you try to gate all this stuff, like gate white papers and things we did 10 or 20 years ago, that's really not going to work because you're just going to turn off the buyer.
Yeah, and if just to build off Anna's point about all the different stakeholders that are involved, I mean, just between like the sellers and the end users, procurement, vendor management, sourcing, legal, et cetera, it's just they're all involved and they all have different objectives. So that's what really lengthens the buying cycle. And, especially if you're introducing a new vendor into the customer environment, that becomes a worse situation because it introduces some additional review and vetting process. So that's one critical role that I think cloud marketplaces have been playing, which is if you're procuring software through an existing cloud provider where the customer is already spending, it can really speed up the process significantly, right? So you're basically just integrating that software procurement into a growing cloud budget. So if Google Cloud, for example, is already an approved customer preferred vendor, they can just purchase third-party software marketplace without the need to do this additional vendor review. So this really creates a very scalable and a repeatable procurement process. And they know that the deployment is vetted and integrated with Google Cloud.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Di. And I think we also, we did our G2 buying survey last year. I think 22% of software buyers are now saying they prefer to buy through marketplaces, like Google Cloud or Azure or AWS. And that does really ease the consumerization because, like you said, they can buy it in one place. In some ways, it's also like Amazon Prime, is for your consumer shopping on Amazon where you get one invoice. And I now know AWS, Azure, Google, they're all trying to do the same thing. Just make it really easy to buy. Of course, on the flip side, I think the buyer's a little bit worried about getting locked in, but it certainly makes it more convenient.
Well, and I think that collaboration aspect, I think also is what technology is trying to address. And I think you guys are talking about how do you make that buying experience easier. I think, when you take a look at, and I still remember one of the leads, she runs all of operations and enablement at Zoom. And she was saying, I need you to sell with me, not to me, because I have 11 other stakeholders, and especially in the environment we're in today, where those 11 stakeholders aren't sitting in an office where you can walk by and go, hey, can I chat with you in the coffee? Let's go grab coffee and I'll talk to you about this for a second. It is a scheduled meeting with intentionality to go, hey, I need to talk to you about this thing. And if they have to go do all the education versus the seller helping, how do you create that collaborative environment? I think the technology environment, obviously at Outreach, it's one of our core things. We talk about success plans, a collaborative environment within the technology, so that the buyer and seller are working together. They can see how they're ticking off what is the mutual action-based close plan. How do you educate other stakeholders by putting demo videos and security documents and all of that in the same place, inviting CIOs and procurement and revenue operations and whoever else is involved in the buying cycle into that environment to help them self-educate, right? Because that is part of this. It's like, how do you create hubs where they can go learn about what's going on without having your champion or coach going and doing that education with that extra time spent and making it much more efficient and effective. And I think you're seeing that as the technology platforms evolve as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. That's really great. Di, can you kind of talk about how the GCP marketplace has evolved and how it will lend the evolution of the B2B buying experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the growth of Google Cloud Marketplace, specifically over the last 12 to 18 months, it has been quite staggering because if you look in February of this year in our quarterly earnings announcement, we publicly shared some growth metrics as related to Google Cloud Marketplace, which was in the first 3 quarters of 2021. The gross transaction value, dollar value flowing and transacted on the marketplace grew at greater than 500% year over year, which is unbelievable. And then if you look at in 2021, the number of customers spending more than $1 million through Google Cloud Marketplace, that increased by 6x year over year. So clearly, one of the largest or fastest growing cloud marketplaces. And what we've done in terms of this evolution to help build the business, but also evolve the B2B buying experience is really make a number of investments across product, our business policies in terms of go-to-market, and then how do we approach working with our partners. So, first, obviously, customers really love the ability to draw down on their committed cloud spend. So solutions that are procured through Google Cloud Marketplace count 100% dollar for dollar toward their committed Google Cloud spend. And as I mentioned earlier, I think customers really like the ability to consolidate their vendor relations and billing, so they can get to their solutions more quickly, and they don't need to have separate billing agreements for the different partner solutions. Now, on the platform side, we've also introduced a number of things related to governance, customization, and control, because I think there is a misconception that marketplaces can lead to uncontrolled spending or lack of internal visibility to the usage and cost. So being able to establish and enforce standards and controls across the customer cloud landscape is very challenging but important for particularly large organizations. So we rolled out this capability called service control or service catalog functionality. And what this does is it makes teams more productive by making sure that we have distribute approved solutions and their configurations across the organization. So you can enforce governance and policies within the console. And so this not only simplifies compliance, but it also saves engineering time down the road, because you don't have to worry about like manual configurations or post-build reviews. So that's another piece. And then on the ecosystem side, to ensure that we have like the broadest range of solutions available for the customer, we've taken a first party equals third party approach. So what we want to do is we want to drive consistency in terms of how we promote, sell, and distribute solutions on Google Cloud, whether it's first party service or our ecosystem solutions. So what you'll see is, for example, on the business policy side, we have some strong alignment with our Google Field sellers because they get compensated quota attainment for most third-party marketplace solutions. And then there's broad, co-marketing and co-selling opportunities with the field, right? So, whether it's sort of linking to registered incentives that link to registered co-sell deals, or creating sort of co-branded campaigns to help build healthy pipeline, there are ways for us to go to market together. So this is really just broad set of investments when you look across sort of business results, our business policies, our platform investments, and the momentum we're seeing with the ecosystem.
Nice. Thank you. Anna or Godard, any comment on what Di said?
It's just impressive that you're seeing 5 to 6x growth, for solutions sold through the Google Cloud Marketplace. And I think the other thing I would say, I've always been a software entrepreneur, software seller. And obviously, I think what I've also heard from some startups, it also gives them the advantage. You don't have to even build their own billing or their own business infrastructure, because Google Cloud will do all of that for you. And I think also what you're doing at Tackle Misty is cool, because obviously you can help vendors hook into Google Cloud, but potentially also Azure, AWS. So I think it really also changed the whole go-to-market motion, for a lot of software sellers, and to better align with the the buyers who want to buy through the marketplaces. So it is, I think, just going to be a huge change for our whole industry.
Thank you. Godard, you've already touched on it a couple of times with your recent buyer survey about some of those stats and stuff. Can you kind of share some of the key themes from the survey and how those themes have evolved over time?
Yeah, and I think one big theme in the survey, as I mentioned, is consumerization. We talked about the crisis of trust. And I think on the other side, we also obviously asked, who do you trust? And probably no surprise, we all trust our peers, especially professional peers, potentially other companies. And I think that's the number one thing I think we all look for. Hey, is there a peer at another company that's in my job function? Like Anna, if you talk to a peer revenue leader, they love an app, or maybe it's a peer revenue leader that loves outreach. I think nothing accelerates your sales cycle like peer selling. And I think that's what the buyer really wants. And obviously that's also we're all about at G2 now, is making sure there's over 2 million trusted authenticated reviews. We tie them all to LinkedIn profiles, because I think also the key in the business world is that it's a peer in a similar company in a similar role. And if they love an app or a cloud service, odds are you'll love it as well. So we think that's a really big trend. And one other trend that we're seeing is also how they want to buy is different. As I mentioned, it's no longer the CIO or executives making decisions on cloud services. We're seeing bigger teams. And I think one of the biggest shifts, though, is also it's technical experts now. They really want to get their hands on the product. I think we're all seeing trial and try before you buy. And it's really experts, potentially real users. Like in Anna's case, it might actually be sales reps. Maybe they want to get their hands on outreach before they leave and make a buying decision. And I think also the marketplace is now enable that, make it easier to provision trials. Because I think without technical experts at your customers getting their hands on the product, it's going to be really hard to close any deal. Absolutely.
Perfect. This is a question for you, Anna, and one probably near to my heart as someone on the sales side. So, how are modern sellers evolving to learn more about and to be able to serve what buyers really want?
It's funny. I think if you grew up on go-to-market teams and you look at the history of what we've all done, there was a recipe for success, and everybody had, their intuition. And here's the thing that I know is their storytelling capability. But I think as you look now, and so much, obviously, that millennial generation is coming into the sales force, and they're also the buyers. They are also really big on how do I digitally engage? And we were talking about this a minute ago. How do I help educate my buyer without going, okay, I need to put you into 5 meetings, but also how do you self-educate? So how do you self-educate on what's happening with that customer? Where are they searching? Where are you looking for surge signals from? Obviously, there's lots of technology out there that's providing signals on where buyers are and what they're looking at. Digital advertising has done this for years, where they're like, okay, this person's looking for a car right now, serve them a car ad. And that is happening as you look now when you look at B2B selling as well, as this person is looking for these types of technologies. How are you introducing and giving them access to that without saying, hey, I need to schedule a meeting with you? Is it sending them a video or directing them to a demo capability site? Getting some of their team to self-serve onto a self-serve platform to try the product. You look at so many of those angles where you say, okay, how are they engaging with their buyers? But I think the other thing that the new modern sellers are also understanding is there are buying groups. And I think we've hit on that a couple times now. You are not probably going to, and especially, we had the pandemic and now we obviously all love the word recession because why not? We haven't done enough in the last couple of years. Let's throw one of those in the mix. Gotta love this. Like, haven't we been tested enough? But I think it's when you seriously think about that, the CFO, finances. If there's not a CFO, I don't know right now, who isn't going, I need to replan for this year and look at where my spending is going and how am I thinking about consolidation of budget? Are they going to look at adoption of my software? Yes, they are, right? When they look at, so when you say, I'm going to sell into this, it's not just selling into, it's what is that customer journey after the sell? And obviously we have a lot of full cycle sellers. We have new logo versus obviously expansion teams. But when you think about that handoff in the modern selling environment, it's not just about handing off. It's like, how are we continuing to expand in those organizations? How are we continuing to make sure that customer is successful? Adoption is huge. So how are you understanding not just the customer journey of their buying cycle, but the customer journey of then that next phase of expansion cycle, right? And how are we making sure we're understanding, are they healthy? What are their challenges change? We may have identified for good sellers, which is one of the big things. It's not enough to show up in the door and go, hey, tell me about your business. It is, hey, here's the research I've done. Here's the challenges that I'm hearing. And we are seeing modern sellers go out and get that from, individual contributors that are on, at an account that, are hearing what's going on in the organization, understanding their experience, understanding the messaging that's coming from leadership. Obviously, if it's a public company or not, making sure you're trying to understand what is leadership saying or the challenges that they're focused on. How do you come in with a perspective and a point of view? And then how do you continue to educate yourself? Because those change, right? For all companies, those challenges you identified that maybe had you getting in the door are not going to stay the same. And they also are not always the same across every stakeholder, right? So you also have to make sure you're educating across what are the challenges all the stakeholders are seeing. So as you say, here's the way we're going to solve and provide solutions to your business, you are addressing those multiple perspectives of challenges, not just the one that you heard from a particular coach. And I think that engagement model of engaging them where they are, letting them educate, multiple stakeholder engagement, and that's getting harder and harder, obviously, without technology. So I think that is such a core now, is how are you enabling them to do that, to span across stakeholders, to message correctly to all persona, to have a collaborative environment they can work in, and then to continue to understand what success of that customer looks like and where their new challenges are evolving to, so we continue to drive adoption and expansion, which obviously as the recession continues, if that is the direction we're going, those pocketbooks will get smaller. And so all of those things will be absolutely critical for success.
Yeah, I really love how you touched. Oh, go ahead, Godard.
Yeah, I was going to say the engagement theme, engagement across stakeholders at your customer. And I think also the idea of, starting to measure that obviously pre-sale and then continuing to measure adoption post-sale. And one thing I just want to build on in the pre-sale side, one of the things we also provide at G2 is intent data. And, so you can actually monitor at your target accounts, what are they shopping for right now? What categories, what types of solutions are they looking for? And that can make your outreach much better. And we do have an outreach integration, as well, for example. So then your SDRs, BDRs, you can be scoring your prospects digitally, pre-sales, see what they're engaging with, and then reach out to them at the right time with the right message, with the right solution. And I think that can turn a lot of outreach from being kind of annoying into very timely, because if you're reaching out to them for a solution they're looking for, I think that can be very helpful to the buyer. And I would say post-sale, obviously everything Anna said, now we all have to make sure, do our customers really adopt? Do they get value? It's also something we're working hard on at G2. And like Anna, we do have fear, right? If this really becomes a recession, will our customers start cutting back spend? And then I think you have to make doubly sure that they're adopted and they're happy. And I think the nice thing with most of us selling cloud solutions, we can measure that, right? We can measure it digitally pre and post sale. And so I think getting a system where you can instrument that, track your customers' engagement across stakeholders is now, I think, just super critical.
Yeah, I love that you both touch on that. Obviously, as someone who manages the renewals and expansion team at Tackle, like obviously customer adoption and customer success and customer satisfaction is super important. So, it isn't just the pre-sales buying motion anymore. It's the continuing of that relationship and, continuing to make sure the customer is happy and they are adopting and they're finding value in your, in your solution. So I love that you guys both touched on that as well. Love it. Gonard, you've mentioned this a couple of times already today, but around the trust crisis a little bit. Can you talk a bit more about how brands can overcome and win back buyer trust?
Yeah, no, and I think and there's a trust crisis, not just in software. I think sadly many of us don't trust our government. We don't trust health authorities. We don't trust Facebook. We don't trust social networks. So it's just really hard, world we're in that sense. We really don't know who to trust. And I am inspired there also by Mark Benioff, the founder and CEO of Salesforce, and he'd acquired my prior company, SteelBrick, and learned a lot from him. But I think one of the things he says is you just have to be a values-driven company. And I know at Salesforce, he always made trust his number one value. And I think that's also something now I'm learning as a leader. As our company gets bigger and bigger, we have 700 employees. But how can we be really clear on our values and really making trust central to them? And that includes obviously things like privacy, security. Can our users trust us with our data? In our case, also, can they trust our reviews? Are they all authentic? Are they real? And so we invest a lot in, obviously, we validate every review, both with AI and with a human. We have our own SOC 2 now, working on our own compliance, our own security, so we can be as trusted as possible. But I do think you have to make it number one value. And sometimes it's a hard trade-off. Maybe you can't chase the next deal because that customer can't really trust you yet for that use case. But I think it's really being values driven and really being clear that trust is your company's number one priority.
Nice. Thank you. Anna, you've held a couple of different roles in your career, from CFO to COO, now to CRO at Outreach. So I'm pretty sure you have a unique perspective on this. How do you help bring the different functions together at Outreach towards building a buyer-driven purchasing experience?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm working my way through the C's clearly. It's really dynamic. Bandy and I used to talk about this. You can create an amazing entry point where a buyer can get in through a self-service capability or a sandbox capability. But you do need to look at what is that buyer experience all the way through, how do they pay their bill? And as we've looked at that, it's like a boa constrictor swallowing a pig. If it gets stuck somewhere, it's still going to be unpleasant. And it doesn't matter that it was easy to get in. So really taking a look at, as you look at the experience across what that customer journey is within your organization. It's funny, as go-to-market teams sometimes are like, oh, no, finance has got that, but they don't. And back to what you said a moment ago, Misty, if there's something that's going to be really challenging with billing and they can't figure out POs and they can't understand their invoicing and they don't understand what's happening with the order forms that they're getting and other experiences, product challenges, then you aren't going to get the expansion renewal, right? So it is, how do you make sure you understand and how do you have collaborative groups across? We do this all the time. We meet at least once a quarter, depending on, but I actually do it by segment. And so my enterprise team will meet with our enterprise legal team and our corporate controller and our revenue operations team. And we talk about what are challenges we're seeing for customers. What is the experience we're having? Where are we getting stuck? Is there something different we need to do on the people, process, technology side to help ease the friction in that customer journey? Because that customer journey obviously doesn't end when you issue the order form. Obviously it continues all the way through. So I think that's one aspect that I think is super critical. I think just to on that theme of a little bit of what we hit on today, we saw this when the pandemic hit. We will see this now. If you think that everybody's taken the summer off and they are off on summer vacation, the CFOs are not. They are sitting back down and taking a look at the plans that they have, and they are going to start looking at how do they make the program more efficient than maybe it was already budgeted for. And that means cutting costs, consolidation of spend. They are going to be looking at that right now because they are going to be preparing for it. So as you go talk to your customers, know that those CFOs are going to have an incredible influence. We saw this beginning of the pandemic, every deal had a CFO approval involved. That was not the case prior. It has stuck with us quite a bit over these last couple of years. It will not get lighter, I guess is my message. So know that when you look at your buying group as well, we always end up with, procurement and other people involved in that, those multiple stakeholders. How are you educating them early on the value you're bringing to the organization? Don't wait for security and legal till the end. It is like bring them in finance in particular. How do you help educate them on the value your product's going to have earlier in the buying cycle so they get the business case story before it comes down to, hey, you need to approve this spend that I need to have right now. And it's easier for them to say no because the risk is high. Right? There's a lot of other pressure factors, and when they weren't brought on the journey and don't understand, you are not doing yourselves any favor. So again, that collaboration across the stakeholders and educating them through the buying process, not waiting till the end and just hope they say yes. I think that is going to be, has been critical for us. It will continue to be as you look at those different organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. A really good point. It's also something to take to heart when you're talking to your own customers about like expansion opportunities and what they're doing, and making sure that you're bringing in the right people at the right time. And we always say, like, the earlier you can get other groups involved, I think the better off you are with building trust and communication with that customer. So we have about, go ahead, sorry.
And I was just going to say, and focusing on the adoption, the first place that we'll start looking are for products that are not adopted well. And that will be where procurement and finance are also going to be looking as they look to be more efficient in their spend.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of minutes left, Di. There actually is a question in the chat, so I'm just going to kind of hop over there really quick. From Peter, it is, our partners are allowed to resell vendor products in GCP. What would be needed to do as a new partner?
Yeah, so it looked like we had Brian answer with a link to the documentation, but yes, we do enable it. So any Google Cloud partner with a sort of like a sell authorization is able to resell. It's just that we only have a select set of ISVs that are enabled for resell currently, but it's expanding. So that's a quick answer.
Awesome, thank you. And one more for you, kind of as we start to wrap up. What do you think the next generation of buyers will be looking for in their new purchasing experience? And how can we prepare for that upcoming generation now, Di?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to a lot of the themes we hit on before, which is really enabling this sort of self-service transaction model between discover, trial, purchase, and deploy software. And, today we do have certain solutions that lend itself well to this model, like developer tools and data sets, free trials. But I think what's going to happen, to touch on Anna's point, I think it's how we think about the evolution of these supporting functions. So today, if you look at, these procurement, sourcing, vendor management functions, they are still kind of, in a large number of companies, still like the gatekeepers, and they still feel they need to sort of execute on behalf of the business stakeholder. And I think what needs to happen is they need to sort of evolve, right? So really it's around sort of setting these guardrails and making sure that we manage risk. So they're not actually executing all these transactions themselves. And so you allow like the business stakeholders, the IT stakeholders to basically execute on these procurement activities, but without the direct involvement of these supporting functions. So, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think it's going to be a process where, you set the guardrails, you see there's a feedback loop to see what's working, what doesn't work, and you sort of adjust. And then sooner or later, these functions are going to understand and be more comfortable around what's sort of managing risk and what that ongoing feedback is. So I do believe that we'll get to this model of, true self-serve across the full life cycle.
Nice. We have about a minute left, and we've touched, I think, on like quite a few things and quite a few common themes. So Anna, any kind of just last minute closing thoughts for the audience?
I think go-to-market teams, there's a revolution happening. It's evolved over time, but now it's truly a revolution with the insights and technology that is available to help those teams, it really change the customer experience, which is what we're talking about here. How do you make sure your buyers are having the best experience you possibly can? And it's going to be fun to watch, I think, over these next 5 to 10 years, because it has evolved so quickly. I mean, we're running a whole new category that has been created, obviously, just in the last like 7 years or so. And it is, how do we watch and say, what are the things that buyers want next? And how are those things being put into technology that enables the sellers to address those wants in a way better way? And we're seeing the beginning. Honestly, I think I say this is like Amazon when they sold books. We're not anywhere near being done yet. There's going to be a whole lot coming down the pipeline here. And I think it's an exciting time to be part of a go-to-market organization.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank our panelists for being here today. We are up on time. So thank you to Anna, Di, and Godard for being a part of this conversation. And I look forward to the next one sometime soon. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Misty, for hosting us.
Absolutely. My pleasure.